switch to the other track, but stay here and we're going to talk about local seed saving, which I think is going to be pretty important as we move forward and build a resilient food system. I think seed saving will be critical. So Laura Parker owns and operates High Desert Seed and Gardens south of Montrose, Colorado. She was born and raised on a ranch in Western Colorado and realized her dream of establishing a seed company after working on several farms in the US and India. Since 2015, High Desert Seed and Garden has focused on growing regionally adapted seed for the high desert and mountain regions for gardeners and farmers. They have high standards for germination rates and cleaning. Their seeds are open pollinated, non-GMO, and grown with all natural methods on their farm and in partnership with a few dedicated farmers. So I am just pleased as punch to have Laura here, and I will turn it over. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to just share my screen and we'll get started. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, I've, let's see, how do I do this? There we go. Okay. So yeah, thank you guys for having me here. I'm really excited to be with you and share my love for seed saving. So we've got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. This is like a really expansive topic, so I'm gonna kind of just jump right in. So yeah, so my company is High Desert Seed and Gardens, really focused on finding crops that can grow in our short season, our extreme sun, sometimes our heavy soils, and you know, our 20-degree temperature swings even in the summertime. And, you know, also the July freezes, I guess. So yeah, so, there we go. So yeah, so why save seed? One reason is independence, food independence. You know, it all starts with seed. It is the foundation of agriculture. And many people, you know, have no idea. And most farmers seem to not really have any idea what it takes to bring a crop to seed. One reason might be cost. It also, you know, growing your own seed, you're ensuring that it's being selected and grown for low input conditions, and you know, organically, because many seed crops, you know, take sometimes 4 times as long to produce seed. So our biennial crops, for instance, you know, are going to take 2 seasons to produce. Yeah, another reason is maintaining our food flavors and our diverse culture. I think food is so interlinked to our society and seeds that's a really critical point. So here's a quote from Vandana Shiva that says, "Seeds are the first link in the food chain. They're the embodiment of biological and cultural diversity and the repository of life's future evolution." I really think that speaks to a lot of the reasons that I got into seed saving and why I'm doing this work, because I do believe that our genetic diversity is critical moving forward, especially in a changing climate. And just to tell you what's going on in this picture, this was a seed seva going out to the community and collecting seeds for the community seed bank. And in the lower hand corner, it was about 300 varieties of rice that we're curing that we were preserving on the seed farm in India there. So yeah, just to get into seed saving, we're gonna go over some important terms. So open pollinated varieties are stable varieties that, that when you save the seed, they're true to type. So they are plants that can be open pollinated and they're gonna be the same variety in the next season if you save them. So they're open to the wind and the bugs to pollinate them. So a hybrid or an F1 you see many times on in your seed catalogs. It's and those are varieties that are created by the crossing of two parental lines. So sometimes we're talking about kind of a little F1 that's just two, kind of stable OP varieties that are crossed. And sometimes we're talking about a big F1, and that's most commonly what the varieties that you're buying in your seed companies are, which are two highly inbred lines that are then crossed to form hybrid. And in corn, there's certainly a hybrid vigor that's expressed, which means uniformity of plants and highly productive plants. So you guys can ask me more questions about that in the comments. Hoping to get to that point. So yeah, and then an heirloom is, somewhat of a varied definition. I think everyone has kind of a different definition for that. Many times it's referred to, an heirloom is something that's been maintained for 3 human generations or kept in commercial production for over 100 years. So an important note is that all heirlooms are open pollinated, but not all open pollinated varieties are heirlooms. Okay. So, and then a quick comment on GMO varieties. They are varieties in which genes have been inserted into the DNA of the host variety. So this like artificially transferred via virus is common now, the CRISPR technology. There's different methods that they've employed. So generally, we're talking about GMOs, it is the transfer of genes from a different species or different genera into the plant. So, sometimes, they've taken a gene from a flounder to help with this shelf-stable tomato and put it into a tomato. That's one example. So, but we're not going to get into that issue. So the steps to save seed, just in overview, is we want to start with an OP variety. I'm going to go into this in detail. I'm just going to go through it quickly now. You want to define what your population size is and your isolation distance. During the growing season, we're going to do selection, really important, and roguing throughout the life of the plant, and even during the harvest of the seed. Ripening, processing the seed, storing the seed, and maybe running a germination test, and then planting the seed. Those are the steps. So at first you want, when you're growing an open pollinated or growing something to seed, you want to define what your goal is. So your goal, if you're a farmer, might be, that you just want to save money on your salad seed, perhaps. So maybe you're growing some mustards out to seed and you don't care too much if they get crossed up, so you're not going to pay as much attention to your isolation distance and whatnot. So, or perhaps you have been gifted by your grandmother a variety that she's maintained for her life, and you really want to maintain that variety with great genetic, preservation. So those might be you might have two different ways of going about selecting or saving seed for a mustard with those two different ideas in mind. So generally, you're going to want to pick an open pollinated variety so that as you save the seed, it's going to be true to type. Step 2 is really to know your plant's pollination system. So just basically, this is a perfect flower that has the male and the female parts. So we have the anther here with the pollen that generates the pollen. That's the male part, the stamen. And the pollen goes into the stigma and comes down into the ovaries. So those are kind of the main important parts of a perfect flower. So when I say perfect flower, I mean a flower that contains both male and the female parts. So, tomatoes, beans, peas, broccoli, cabbage, carrot, all of those have perfect flowers. And just as a side note, they can be outcrossing or self-pollinating because those flowers have both the male and female parts. So there are also plants that have imperfect flowers. So that means that they have male and female parts in different places. So there are monoecious plants that have male and female parts in one house, on one plant. So that would be squash, for instance, that have male and female flowers. Cucumbers, corn, and then there's also dioecious plants that are male and female plants. So of course, hemp and marijuana, those are dioecious. So these are always outcrossing. They're outcrossing plants, and they definitely need a larger population size for genetic resilience. So crossers, I often say crossers and selfers. And so by crossers, I mean that they're outbreeding plants and they depend on a large population. They're usually wind pollinated and have perfect or imperfect flowers. The selfers, they always have perfect flowers and they pollinate themselves before opening sometimes. And many times the selfers depend on pollinators to trigger that pollination. For instance, tomatoes are much aided. That's why they suggest sometimes going through and shaking your tomato plants to get fruit set. Is the vibration from the bees help with that? Okay, so basically this is all getting to this idea that this is all kind of on a spectrum. So this is about determining your population size. So the more inbreeding they are, the plants, generally the smaller population size that you're going to need. And so oftentimes that might be a good place for beginning seed savers to start because it's going to take up a lot less space. And the more outbreeding your crop is, the bigger the population you will need. And really that's because it needs that larger, it has to outcross to get seed set. And you really need that genetic breadth to have resilience in those type of crops that need that outcrossing. Whereas the self-pollinators really don't need that for genetic resilience. Sorry, I keep having to move. I need to get rid of this. There we go. 1 second. Okay. So yeah, the other important step is as you get into growing your seed crop is roguing and selection. So we all want to be good seeders and move our plants forward along with us and really be thinking about what our goal is, selecting for resilience for low input systems, selecting for, for us, maybe heat tolerance as we go from spring to summer in an instant, and selecting for cold tolerance, those extremes of the season. So, and then also just making sure we're not saving seed from off types and that kind of thing. So you can do roguing and selection at the seedling stage as this is showing. And sorry, I'm having trouble with there we go. Or, in the field, this is lettuce crops, so it's about ready to start to show signs of bolting. And we're going to go out there and rogue out any that are bolting early because we really want to select against early bolting. So you really have to become a plant Jedi when you save seed and really start to observe and show what you're doing and think about what you're selecting for. This is a really critical part of the seed saving process. So it can also happen at the fruit stage. Here's pepper plants. Often we'll select for the right shape and qualities that we like to see in the final product before we extract the seed. This one, I think this broccoli head, maybe I didn't make this a selection, but I think I was excited that this is a breeding project I've been working on, and this plant you can see got hailed on pretty heavily, and we had one of those freak kind of late June freezes, and it still made a really great sized head, which is a struggle for spring broccoli here. And that's what I'm trying to select that crop for. So we can also do selection at the fruit stage here with we just did this the other day. We held these beautiful Stella Blue squashes until this week and selected all the ones that were really holding well in storage to have our stock seed to move forward with that seed saving of that crop. So again, here's where we're at. So we started with an OP variety. We determined our population size, the isolation distance that we'll need, depending on the pollination system. We've done selection and roguing. So now we're going into the ripening and process and storage. Okay, so when you get your seed ready and it's, you know, starting to turn tan or starting to turn brown and dry down, you want to make sure you're getting out there and cutting the seed before it shatters. And then you have a place to cure it. And that's what you can see here is bundles of different seed crops curing over here. So we're going to go on to processing seeds. So there's two different main ways of processing seed. There's dry processed seed and then also wet processing seed. And sometimes there's an added step of fermentation in the wet processing. So seed crops that are wet processed, here you're going to extract the seed from the fruit. You're going to either ferment it. So that is the case with tomatoes. You really want to be fermenting that. And I'm going to go into that a little more in a second. And then after fermentation or after just extracting the wet seed, you're going to start a process of washing it by filling it up with water and pouring off the skin and the flesh. And the idea is that the seed will float to the bottom, will sink to the bottom, and then you're going to decant all of the other trash off of the top. It's a beautiful process. And then when you're done, you're pour it into screens. And it's really important to pour it off into a screen and very quickly start to dry that seed down. Usually we take it and put it in front of a fan and are coming in and stirring it periodically. And then a final step might be to do a final step of winnowing. So, and this is what dry seed cleaning looks like for us. So those two are working on doing some seed dancing. That's what we do on the farm, and or AKA threshing of the seed off of the stalks there. So at first you're going to thresh your seed out of its seed pods. So that can be, you know, rubbing it in your hands or dancing on it like you're seeing here. Sometimes when we have a really big bean crop, we drive on our seeds to get them to thresh. So, and then you're gonna scalp them, which is really, or skim it off. So that's just quickly removing any big sticks, stems. There's a really beautiful motion of kind of bringing all of the trash up to the top and letting the seeds fall to the bottom and kind of getting rid of that material quickly. Then you might do a first initial screen, and then it's going to be to the winnow stage. And then generally you're going to screen, winnow, screen until you have a very clean product. So yeah, what is winnowing? So winnowing is using wind to separate the seed from the chaff. So it's really using airflow to take away particles and be left with the seed. So that's what Sheila Devi's doing here. And just a note, any flat kind of baskets or cookie sheets even can be used to do this. Really, it's really helpful to have that and use kind of a vibration like this to clean the seed when you're doing it at home. Oops. I'm sorry, guys. There we go. Okay, so other helpful tools for dry seed cleaning. You know, for years and years, we've done it with box fans. super easy to come by. We now have a winnow wizard that has upped our game with winnowing, but a box fan you can do so much with. So masking tape, of course, because you always want to be keeping good records. You're going to need tarps. Hardware cloth is super helpful. Any sheets. A lot of times we have used remade to bring crops in and dry them and cure them for threshing. I'm a collector of sieves and strainers and things from thrift stores. Especially helpful are anything with round holes. If you can pick up anything like that from your thrift stores. Yeah, and then flat baskets are really helpful, buckets and that kind of thing. So here's one of our commercial screens that we use, and those are easy to come by. These are from Seed Burrow, but there's some like Strictly Medicinal Herbs has a good set of screens and that you can buy now. And also Siskiyou Seeds I saw is selling some really beautiful seed screens, seed cleaning screens. So here is another, a picture of doing the winnowing. This is from Frank Morton. This is his style of finish cleaning. So he's actually using it through on the back of the fan to pull the chaff through the fan. And this is just like a really good way of finish cleaning of looks like an amaranth seed crop there. Yeah, and then, you know, here we are. This is a big tomatillo seed crop we had this year, and we just put it onto a window screen and are stirring it and drying it down really quick after we did a wet seed cleaning process. So yeah, storage, for seed storage, really the principles are to keep it a stable temperature. So you want it cool, dry, dark, stable, and sealed. So you want to really avoid any big swings in temperature is the main thing, and have that seed quite dry. Here, you know, it's pretty easy for us to get to that level of dryness in our dry climate. So you definitely want to keep the temperature below 100 degrees Fahrenheit because high temperatures definitely damage the viability of seeds. The picture behind here is actually from Rajasthan. I was traveling through Rajasthan by camel, and I asked, this was the only lock I saw on anyone's door out there. We were really close to the border with Pakistan and India. And I asked them what this was, and they said it was where they store their seed. So you can see this is like the perfect seed storage thing. It's got thick adobe walls, so it's going to be cool and a stable temperature, and it's sealed from varmints, and yeah, it's all the dark and cool. So yeah, I wanted to take you guys through a few crops and really show you what that looks like from seed to seed. So this is lettuce. This is a beautiful Drunken Woman seed crop. So you can see that when, and one thing I wanted to mention today, that when you're growing something to seed, it takes a lot longer time. It's like when you don't want lettuce to go to seed, it'll bolt and just go to seed right away. But when you're growing it for seed and give it lots of space, it gets huge and really takes the whole season to do its thing and come to fruition and dry down. So, you know, we didn't harvest this crop until probably September, around September 1st. So yeah, so lettuce is an annual. It will produce in one season. It's self-pollinating, so you really need a minimum isolation distance, right? Because it's that self-pollinating. And probably, you know, you can get away with as few as 10 plants to save seed off of it. And then for harvesting lettuce, you know, there's several different methods you can do. If you're just a backyard thing, it's ripening over time. So you can go out every week with the bag and just kind of bend the heads over into the bag, like a paper bag, and kind of tap them into the bag. Or you can wait until the seed is about, you know, you have a really non-windy climate and there's no birds and things like that, you can wait till the seed crop looks like it's about 70% mature and go in there and cut them off from the ground and lay them over to cure. And then the other method that we use is we go in when the crop is about 60% mature and we pull them up with the root ball attached and we lay them over onto remay or something perforated, making sure that the root ball stays off of that. And we protect them for a few days, and then the seed crop matures more fully, that you can see it just becomes a whole fluff in there of maturing seed. It kind of takes all the juices from the root ball and from the rest of the plant. And then we go on to the threshing step. So to thresh the seed, you're kind of gently beating the seed out of the lettuce to get it to thresh out. So I can answer more questions about that in the end. So another crop I thought you guys could do up in Gunnison and this area is a biennial crop. I think they're quite easy to produce, and it's a biennial because it takes 2 full seasons to grow. So this is showing over here, we've got our cosmic purple stecklings, they're called, the roots there that have been trimmed down. So we trim them kind of at a triangle shape all around the top of the growth point. So we want to be really careful not to damage that growth point, but to trim the leaves close to the root so that that doesn't rot and destroy the life of the crop as it goes into storage. So it's really important with biennials that they undergo a certain period at a cold temperature, depending on what type of biennial it is, and go through a process called vernalization. So that's going to allow the crop to start to want to put its sugar and energy into producing seed the next season when we plant it out. So you can also, in certain climates, though I wouldn't try it in Gunnison, grow, from root to root, basically, or seed to seed, where you plant the seed and leave it in the root crop in the ground over winter and then let it go to seed the next spring. We really prefer to pull our root crops and do selection on them and select them for color and shape. One thing about carrots is it is an outcrosser, right? So we want a really big population. We actually prefer a minimum population of 200 stecklings. So part of the reason for that is it's really important to have a large genetic breadth within that crop. And because if you narrow it too much, you're going to have inbreeding depression, and it's going to hurt the quality of your seed crop going forward. So, and then one thing also is you don't want to select it too much for perfection. You want to take out any of your super off types. So for instance, if there was a root over here on the right that didn't show this Nantes type shape, that would be taken out. But maybe this one that's the 4th one over has slightly broader shoulders and a little bit different shape, but it's still within the Nantes spectrum. So we want to keep that in there. This is a philosophy that I learned from Dr. John Navazio, who's worked carrot breeding for a long time. So with these type of crops, it's really important to think about that. I'm just giving you guys a little more detail for those of you that are more advanced in getting into seed saving. So many times when we're growing crops to seed, they produce really big, plants. And so they need a lot of space. They need more space than you would usually give them when you're growing a crop. So, with the carrots, we're going out at about 10 to 12 inches. So this is them going in the early spring, about April 1st. And they can go in at a slight angle. And one thing you really want to make sure not to water them too much because they can rot. sorry, I'm just checking how I'm doing for time. So, so yeah, larger population, 80 to 200 there. Yeah, so this is one of my favorite seed crops, and this is what it looks like in bloom. You can see they get quite tall and bushy. This is the Singe Rouge Violette carrot seed crop that we grew. And yeah. So yeah, other biennials include beets, leeks, and parsnips, Swiss chard, onions, and cabbage. And all of those things, it's possible to lift them and then hold them in cold storage, or you could even get away with certain things in like a cold garage, but keeping them in wood shaving is really helpful. So yeah, and then the final one I thought would be fun to go in depth in, and would be easy to do in the Gunnison area, is tomatoes. So again, tomatoes are self-pollinating. You really need a minimum of about 5 plants, but probably, if you're trying to have genetic preservation going on, you want about 20 to 30. So yeah, when you do the extraction of the seed, you're gonna squeeze it out with the flesh included, and make sure, even if you're taking the flesh or extracting the seed by hand, we always throw some of the whole fruits in there. Sometimes we'll just like kind of get the seeds out and keep some of the fruits for making sauce, but you always want to put some in with skin, because the skins have natural yeast on them. And so it's really important for the fermentation process. So we really want to ferment tomato seed crops. And part of the reason that we're doing that is it's going to help with certain tomato diseases. The other reason is that tomato seeds have a little, if you've ever noticed, a little jelly sac around the seed. And in that sac, there is a growth inhibitor, and that's keeping it from sprouting while it's in the fruit. So part of what the fermentation process is doing is breaking down that little sac. So you want to get all your flesh and your juice in there, and then put your bucket or your quart jar or whatever in somewhere warm, and it's going to start to ferment in probably about 2 to 3 days. And you're going to want to be stirring that as often as you think about it. We try to aim for twice a day to keep it from forming any kind of mold. But once you start to see this picture to the right here, once you start to see some of this white type yeast forming, then you're good to go, and it's time to clean it. So you're going to be filling it up with water, and the seed will sink, and then you're going to be pouring off the flesh and the skin, and continue doing that a few times until you get to the clean seed. It's quite an enjoyable process. So here I am. This is sometimes how we do it. Just get in there with our feet and crush it up. So this is the Latta Tomato, a really wonderful early season, like the earliest I've ever grown tomato. Yeah, and that's what it can look like. It's pretty easy. So I really ran through that pretty quick. So I think we've got some time, quite a bit of time for questions. And if you guys don't want to, I don't know are we allowed to have them just speak, or do they have to do it in the chat?
I think that in the webinar version that we're in now, they'll have to do it by chat, and I can help moderate that. Just because we have two Zoom tracks. It's not the classroom version here or the roundtable version. So
okay.
First of all, I want to say, Laura, thank you. I have learned a lot, and I realize I need to modify the way I've been saving tomato seeds. I also realize that I want to look you up, because you need to do this for me. It looks like an amazing amount of work, and I appreciate all that you do. So with that, I'm going to ask a few questions for those that are following just verbally. So out of the Q&A, Carla asks, how can you harvest spinach? And I think she means spinach seeds.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, spinach is it's a tricky one here to pull off. It's a it actually, the pollen denatures at a high temperature, so you have to really kind of trick it. And we've had success saving some seed from a fall planting and then letting it go to seed in the spring. But so yeah, so that's one of the ones that you want to have like about a 300 plant at least population size, because it's the dioecious. So it's, you know, it's got the male and the female plants. So that's actually that picture, and maybe I'll go back to that real quick. Sorry guys, I should have said this before. So this picture here, this is actually spinach. I think I was just nervous and rushing a little bit. I get nervous doing these things. But so this is the spinach. So yeah, so the top picture is actually the male plant, and that's the pollen producing plant. And the bottom picture here is the female that's going to produce the seeds. So, but to go to your question, Carla, you really, if you look at this bottom picture, when it goes to seed, if you get good seed set, you're gonna have like dry stalks with the kind of pokey angular seeds on there, and you're just gonna kind of strip those off and even, you know, step on them to get it off, to shatter it off, and then just put it through a very, you know, a 1/2 inch screen probably would work. And then yeah, just go through the winnow process and you probably have a pretty clean seed crop at that point.
Yeah, and if I could jump in with a follow-up question, Laura, the amazing thing for our farm is it's very easy to save spinach seeds in Gunnison. If I leave them long enough, they always go to seed.
Yeah.
If I've had several years where I just take my old seed and replant it, and I don't really worry much about the variety. And maybe there's one advantage of being here. Maybe this could be our new claim to fame in Gunnison, is providing seeds, spinach.
Well, I do contract with growers. So if you want to grow some spinach, people are always asking me, why don't you have spinach? And that's the reason, is it really is hard to produce well.
It is a piece of cake at my cold farm, and let's get in touch about that. I'll certainly have some things to know, because I just like, I just plant what I plant and harvest what I harvest. So, okay. And then there was another question that came in. Oh, this is from Adrian Fielder, our speaker.
Oh, cool.
Speaker. What were you doing in India? He asked. What did you say on your the Vandana Shiva slide, that you had visited Navdanya, or did you meet Dr. Shiva?
Yeah, so both things. I worked with students when I was in college to bring Vandana Shiva to speak. And funnily enough, I had started working at an organic farm that was getting into seed growing at the time. And a friend of mine had said, you have to bring Vandana Shiva. And I was like, I don't know who that is, but I'm going to bring her. And then I got really entrenched in many of the bigger seed issues. And I'd love to give a talk about that sometime, the consolidation in the seed industry, and the work that is being done in organic seed and organic seed breeding and that kind of thing. But Vandana Shiva, we ended up bringing her. We had a really sweet dinner that we did for her, cooking all Indian food. And then I was inspired to go work with her. So I went to India and spent time at Bija Vidyapeth, which is their school there, and they're doing a lot of work to teach other Indian farmers, kind of bring them back into organic farming, and then also doing a lot of work to start community seed banks. And that's what I was helping with, was the seed banks.
Okay.
There.
Great. I'm looking at the Q&A, and I'm not seeing questions popping up right now. So please, we've got about 5 more minutes of Laura's valuable time. So if you have questions, feel free to type those into the Q&A.
Does anyone have a crop that they want me to delve into, or I could kind of list some things that are good for that region?
Carla just asked, what about broccoli? Yeah. Carla asked, what about broccoli? Yeah.
Well, saving seed for broccoli in Gunnison would probably be pretty challenging. It's pretty challenging for me. And that I'm working on, it's a pretty interesting one because I was given some seed at a seed exchange by a plant breeder at Oregon State University. His name's Jim Myers. He's one of, if you guys don't know him, he's one of the heroes of organic plant breeders. He bred the first high anthocyanin tomato using organic methods and traditional breeding methods. At the same time, they were like, the GMO guys were like, we did this GMO thing. And he's like, hey, I did it using normal methods. So yeah, that's why we're seeing all the high anthocyanin tomatoes around. But anyways, but he gave me some of seed from a work of one of his students who had worked with farmers all across the country in different areas to kind of select their favorite broccoli plant from their initial breeding material that they had started. And then it was, that breeding material was all brought back together. And this is then the seed that I was given basically from all these different farms. And when I started growing it out, I noticed that it seemed to have resiliency to that cold swing that we often get in the spring that can be really challenging for having spring broccoli because it shocks the plant and then it only wants to make those little buttons instead of making a full head. And it also seems fairly heat tolerant as well. So I find often, like genetically, that cold tolerance and heat tolerance go together. At first I was like, huh, like that's great. Like, you know, why is that happening? But then I started thinking about it more and, you know, it makes sense because, you know, deserts really have to be able to deal with those swings in temperature, you know, because in the desert, it can be hot in the day and freezing night. So anyways, I don't think that really answered the broccoli question, but but yeah, it's a cruciferous plant. It is in annual, actually, it's going to go to seed in one season. So when we've been doing our selection of it, we up there and we flag ones that make good heads, and then we don't harvest those for food crop. My customers don't know it, but I'm sending them the culls. Yeah, and then we let those go to seed. So they have a pollination mechanism that prevents them from self-pollinating, like on their head. So they really want outcrossing. So it's important that, and that's something I've struggled with and had to learn, is that you have enough of them going to seed at the same time to get good seed set. They have a really interesting strategy for making sure that they get that genetic outcrossing. That's
Laura,
important.
when you do that, say when you're growing broccoli for seed, is it better to plant in blocks or plant in rows for that cross pollination to, or out pollinate, for the pollination to occur?
Yeah, I mean, it probably would be beneficial in blocks for sure, to keep it in a block if you've got a small area. I think that would help.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, we have about one more minute. Oh, I do see that Carla, I think you answered Carla's question. She says she lives and loves in Oklahoma. So, but I think you were able to answer her question. Okay.
Oh, okay.
One more minute. You've got some resources for us.
Yes. Yeah. So here's some resources. The Organic Seed Alliance is a wonderful resource. They have a lot of materials for seed saving and also trial information about varieties they're running in their trials and some of the organic seed breeding work they're doing. The Seed Garden is a really wonderful seed saving book. The Organic Seed Grower by John Navazio. It's really wonderful time because when I started out, there was really only seed to seed as a seed saving book. And now there's a lot of really wonderful in-depth resources at your fingertips. So another good one, and I'd love to give a talk on this sometime, but is Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties by Carol Depp. And I have her name spelled wrong. It's Deppe. And yeah, then there's also another good one that's A Farmer's Guide to Organic Seed Breeding by NOFA New York. So that one's a really great, just kind of giving you the basics of seed breeding. But because really, you know, I just want to leave you guys with that it's a revolutionary act to save seed and to save, you know, if you love one variety of something, you should around. And it's a magical process to be a part of. And you never know, the seed company you get it from might drop it. So it's important to take things into your own hands, I think.
Excellent. Laura, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic talk. Thanks for all of that information. And yeah, I think for folks listening in, we want to be revolutionaries. Okay. So I have a few closing statements for the conference. And I just want to thank you, Laura, Adrian, everyone who spoke, and all of the people who came and attended the conference, our 7th annual Farm to Table conference. And hopefully people got some real actionable information, and you wrote down a few things that you're going to do, that you're going to specifically do to build our own resilient local food system. And I think you've heard this already, but you'll be able to go and watch the recorded sessions on the Gunnison Valley Producers Guild YouTube site. Bear with us, we're not technical professionals, and in a couple of places we forgot to hit the start button on time. You'll notice the first session with Eric McPhail on Thursday, we hit the start button about the time his manure slide was showing up. So our YouTube channel starts with a slide of manure, so which I just find too funny. All right, and then by next week we'll be sending out the local foods cookbook. Please, if you have any recipe that you're just dying to share with your friends and neighbors, email it to me, and we will try to get that into the cookbook before it has to go out, and you'll receive that by PDF. We do hope to expand on that cookbook in the coming years, so send recipes as you have them. And together, we hope that we've inspired everyone, and that that you're going to work with local food, and we can all work together to build this resilient local food system and make a difference. And then, oh, I guess I'm supposed to read a little bit more. If you're still looking for tangible ways to get involved, you could consider volunteering at any of the local farms, which include Iola Valley Farms, Gunnison Gardens, Calder Farm. You could volunteer at the food pantry, the Organics Guild, or with Mountain Roots. And keep tabs on the Gunnison Valley Producers Guild and look for ways to network that way. So I guess that's about it. Thank you again, everyone, for participating, and reach out to us as you continue on or begin your local food journey. And just thanks very much, everyone. All right. And